Talking of fuel, and we're gonna be jumping in and sharing some stories about what works, what doesn't when it comes to food and stabilizing blood sugars, especially surrounding activity and exercise. So, we got a couple people in a few different locations, and I got to make sure that we are, in fact, hearing that the microphone's working. So, give me a quick one in the chat if you can hear me, and then we'll jump into our topics today. We got Instagram people hopping in. Good to see y'all over there. So give me a one in the chat, y'all, if you're able to hear, and then we will go ahead and start. We got Trish on YouTube with the one. Awesome. So today, talking about food as fuel. Now, I'm sure you've heard this term before, or this phrase rather. And, a lot of people think, okay, is food fuel or is food for pleasure, right? Which one am I going to focus on? The answer, truthfully, is both. Like food is fuel. We can fuel our bodies optimally for functionality, for overall health and longevity. But food is also delicious and should be enjoyed, right, to a certain degree. Now, there's a whole conversation to be had around the portion sizes and around the types of foods that we consume, making sure it is balanced, in fact. But what I also want you guys to understand is that with type 1 diabetes, this conversation shifts just a little bit. And so, as we're looking at the story I'm going to share with you today, there are decisions that we can make that will benefit our blood sugars or can lead to some really dangerous and frustrating situations. So, not too long ago, actually, it's about 2 weeks ago, released a podcast episode on my triathlon training and some snacks that I use specifically to keep blood sugars in check. And then this last week, we had an episode with Craig. I was able to interview one of our current clients who's still working with us, and he did better than I did using a similar strategy. He went and worked out for an hour and stayed between 75 and 80. And he uses a very similar strategy where he focused on which types of foods are going to serve him best. He calculated the exact amount he needed for that burn rate, which is something we cover in our programs. And ultimately, he was able to stay stable. The week before, I talked about how I went for a 4-mile run, something I had never done before, and stayed between 90 and 104 for my blood sugars the entire time. And so it's not that exercise is impossible to complete. As we look at the different types of exercise, running, lifting, walking, hiking, but rather the strategies that we need to match with those different types of activities. Perfect example, today I introduced swimming into my routine because triathlon involves swimming and I haven't swam in like years. And so for me, this is just an experimentation process. For swimming, do I take my pump off or do I keep it on? For swimming, do I eat beforehand and feel nauseous or do I set a temporary basal rate before leading up to the event? All these questions that are going to arise as we're thinking about what's the best strategy for my situation. So today I want to cover kind of which snacks you can consume, but I also want you to understand this is just one of multiple strategies. In our programs, we focus on 3 different strategies for how to keep blood sugar stable through exercise. One of them is strategic snacking. One of them is the food as fuel mentality. And so that's what we're going to be kind of diving into today. Now, for my example, when I went for that run, did the 4 miles, there was a very specific sequence of snacks and type of snacks that I utilized in order to keep blood sugar stable. So I woke up in the morning, obviously fasted, right? You wake up, there's nothing on your plate because you're sleeping, right? Hopefully you're not eating in your sleep. And so blood sugars, I woke up, they were at 90. I was like, okay, like this is good, right? It's a great blood sugar to wake up at. However, not my favorite blood sugar to start a run at. Kind of made me nervous, if I'm being real with you guys. And it's like, okay, I already calculated everything I need. I already have the plan. In fact, my snacks were laid out on the counter the night before. And I had a plan. If they're on the lower side, these are the snacks. If they're on the higher side, these are the snacks. And the reason I had 2 sets is that I also woke up an hour earlier. So I didn't know 100% how my blood sugars were going to respond because that's typically the tail end of when my dawn phenomenon usually hits. Now that's an entire different topic as well. You got to have a lot of these things dialed in if you expect to have sugars. So I want to kind of include that caveat. It's not just eat this food and everything magically falls together. It's usually a combination of strategies. But once you do have things fine-tuned, your basal rate, your bolus ratio, your stress levels, your hydration, your sleep, Then we can start looking at the more advanced strategies, like how to calculate the exact amount of carbs. Yes, carbs are important, but what about fats? What about proteins? How do I use those to my advantage instead of having those be the bane of my existence, right? I mean, has anybody else ever had a high fat or high protein meal and then hours later it just destroys your blood sugars? I mean, I know I can't be the only one that's gone out and had, burgers and fries, and you're like, I did it. I stayed in range. Or like pizza, right? Oh, geez. You go and eat pizza and you're like, I'm level and it's been an hour. And then 30 minutes later, it just skyrockets. It grows wings and flies away. It's a nightmare, right? But understanding how these different macronutrients are going to absorb, affect digestion rates, if you've got fitness goals, how they're going to impact weight loss or muscle recovery. These are really critical pieces of information to understand if we expect to have mastery over our bodies, over our blood sugars. So as I'm getting ready to run, right, I am getting ready to head out the door, 90 blood sugar. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to start my run fasted in this case because I haven't made any changes to insulin. I haven't had any snacks yet. So I went ahead and had one of my pre-selected snacks. Now for me, this was a protein bar. It's a protein bar that I have selected intentionally. And one of the reasons I want to start with the protein bar, we think about food as fuel, right? There's a strategy behind the food choices. The protein bar has protein, but it also has fat. And in some cases, it has fiber, depending on which protein bars you have. Now, a key component here is a little bonus for you guys. Protein bars are very different between different brands, right? Some protein bars, their entire goal is to have the lowest net carb score because they want to market that. And the marketing of that is what can be dangerous to us because you look at the packaging and you're like, oh, 2 net grams of carbs. I don't even have to dose for this. That's crazy. And you look on the back, it's like 24 grams of carbs, but all this fake sugar and all this fiber and all these different things. And through some crazy, ridiculous magic trick of a math equation, they've subtracted everything and gotten it down to 2 net carbs. And then in parentheses, it'll say per serving. And then you look on the back and it's like, there's 5 servings in the protein bar. They've always got these loopholes and it drives me nuts. Guys, when I was studying to become a nutritionist, these are the kinds of things that piss me off. We learned about something, I'm getting off track here, but last thing, we learned about something called the PAM scam. You guys know the cooking spray? You spray your pan with oil, your pan with PAM. And the PAM scam is that on the back, on the nutritional label for PAM, cooking spray, made out of oil, which is pure fat, right? The nutritional label would say that there is 0 grams of fat. 0. There's no fat in a product that is fat. What? How does that even work? Well, you look at the serving size. The serving size is 1/3 of 1 second of 1 spray, which means what? That's it. Did you even hear that? Because it was so fast. That's a serving of PAM cooking spray. Who is using more than when they're spraying their pan? Hands up, me, right? There's 15 servings right there. So it's important to realize that a lot of the marketing you see on the protein bar packaging, your favorite foods in the stores, they are meant to sell the product. They're not meant to help you primarily. It's there for information, yes, but a lot of times they get sneaky. So just kind of a sidebar there. All right. So second piece to this, though, is the protein bar. I know which kind is best for me. I know that it's not full of all that crap. The ones that I select, actually, I'll tell you guys, I've been using RX bars recently. A little bit more on the expensive side, but they have a lot more wholesome ingredients. And for me, that's important. And I feel good when I eat them. I don't feel sick or nauseous or anything. So to me, that's important. But the idea behind it was before my run, I want something that's going to give me sustainable energy. Because during my run, I'm going to burn through a lot of energy because it's a 4-mile run. For me, that's a long distance. I don't typically run that much, right? And so as I've got a lot of these different pieces to the puzzle coming together, everything else is in place. If we're just focused on food, the strategy for me was a sustainable snack beforehand. And then during, I have faster acting sugars. Now, my go-to recently has been something called Tailwind. It's a very high carb electrolyte drink. There's 25 carbs per serving, and I dumped two just to have it on hand, right? And quite literally running with a water bottle in my hand. Now, I also had a Camelback that I would feed into my mouth, and that had just pure water. So I had two choices: pure water and sugar water. And that was a great option for me. Now, what I want you to start thinking through as we're talking about these topics is that there was an intention behind the choices that I made, the food as fuel. It wasn't just whatever looks good in the moment. I'm going to grab a snack. No, not at all. Everything was very calculated down to the gram of carbohydrates because I know based on my 80/20 blood sugar formula exactly how many carbs I would need per that activity and that duration of activity. These are important factors for you to take into consideration when you're building out a plan. So, how long am I going to exercise and what type of exercise is it? Right? You got to know these things. If you don't, you're going to be playing catch up, which is fine. There are going to be times where your friends say, "Hey, let's go for a hike." And you're like, "How long is the hike?" And they're like, "I don't know, but let's go." And you're like, "All right, just grab some fruit roll-ups or whatever I got on hand and let's go. Let's just see how this ends." But if you are planning ahead for an activity, there are ways you can strategically set yourself up for success. That's how I started at 90, ran 4 miles, and then finished at 104. Zero spike, perfectly level. Well, not perfectly level because it went up 14 points, right? But a 14-point rise. That's it. That's what you can do when you start to understand the different mechanics of food digestion, of your burn rate, of what types of macronutrients are going to do what to our bodies, right? These are the important things you have to consider when looking at activity and how to match that with food. Now, in different scenarios, I'll give you one here. There was a time probably 5 years ago where I was just a really active guy. Loved going outside, playing at the beach, going on hikes, bike rides, all that fun stuff. Always have been. And I didn't really pay attention to blood sugars at that point, but I felt low. I tested my blood sugars because I didn't have a CGM at that point, and ultimately was going low. I think I was at like 60, and since I didn't have a CGM, there were no arrows, so I would assume I was just dropping rapidly. And in that case, I was like, man, I'm starving. I'm going to grab something that looks good. And so I grabbed, what was it? Like some enchiladas or something. So there's chicken, there's cheese. Like, yes, there's carbs in the tortillas, but I mean, ultimately, it was a very slow digesting food. And while I made it out, I'm alive, right? It was a painfully slow process. I'm sitting on the curb, just like munching on an enchilada. I'm like, this sucks. Just waiting for my blood sugars to come back up. Test again later, and they're like 62. And you're like, okay, I've gone up 2 points. Fantastic. Why did that happen? Is it because the food didn't do anything to my blood sugars? No, it's that the timing of the digestion, absorption, and impact on my blood sugars was delayed because it was higher fat and higher protein content, right? In those circumstances, you need to change the fuel source to match the fuel requirements. If I'm going for a run and I didn't plan ahead at all, I'm probably going to need some fast reacting carbs, right? Because I'm probably going to see a big drop. If I have lots of time to plan ahead, I might be able to have an enchilada an hour before and then not feel nauseous during the run, right? But when you understand that you can select the snacks in order to stabilize blood sugars, it opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. And I know there's probably some naysayers out there. Well, I want to have flexibility to eat what I want. Well, that's too bad. If you want to have perfect blood sugars and your only option is to use food, then you got to be smart about it, right? You can't just go all willy nilly. I'm going to have a pound of chicken and hope that it stops this low from coming on because I've been running for 30 minutes. It's not going to work, right? There are scientific facts behind this. And ultimately, when we're pursuing the furtherance of knowledge and understanding of our disease, we got to put aside our feelings, right? I don't care if I want to eat something if it's not going to benefit my situation with my blood sugars. If I'm currently dropping, grab something fast. Okay. This is just part of the deal with life. You got to match the circumstances and set our feelings aside. So I hope that makes sense so far. Someone on Facebook says, so true, some labeling is misleading. Oh, yeah, yeah, with food labeling, right? Oh my gosh, it kills me. So ultimately today, I got some time left. What I wanted to share with you is that as we look at food as fuel, we got to start selecting our snacks intentionally, right? There's a way that we can keep blood sugar stable without seeing blood sugar skyrocket. So you'll notice that I had the slower digesting, slower absorbing foods first when I was talking about my run example, right? That was intentional to build sustained fuel, keep my blood sugars relatively stable. During the run, I had a fast reacting sugar that I could be more reactive with, right? I didn't chug the whole thing at the beginning of the run. I sipped on it throughout the run. And that's going to change based on the circumstances. There was another day where I went on I think it was like an 8 mile bike ride. And for those of you who don't know, I am training for a triathlon sprint. I don't just do these things for the enjoyment of them necessarily. I wanted to challenge myself. And so I'm in the middle of my training right now. Going on this bike ride, my blood sugars at this one day were starting at 165, a little higher than I would like. But I was like, you know what? There's a cushion. I'm okay with that. So at 165, do I want only fast acting sugars? Probably not, right? Because that's going to push me up past 200. I'm already higher. I have a buffer. So instead, I make a smart decision to select a different type of food that's going to be maybe slower absorbing and match the burn rate that I expect on a bike ride. Now, burn rate, a lot of these things, burn rates, AIRs, these are all things we talk about in our program. Half of you guys don't even know what they are. So it doesn't make sense for me to talk too much on those. But it's the process of understanding that each situation is different and requires us to be dynamic in our selection of strategy. So what does that mean? I talked about this on my Instagram post today, actually. Pre-bolusing, great example. In the doctor's office, if you're lucky to have a doctor or an endo that tells you, hey, pre-bolusing is important, 10 to 15 minutes. That's helpful. It's a good starting point, but I also want you to take it and throw it out the window because ultimately the pre-bolus itself will change day to day, meal to meal. There are so many factors when it comes to type 1 diabetes. We cannot remain complacent as we look at what is going to work for each day. We can't be static in the choices that we make. We can't be repetitive because each day is a new day. There's new variables, new hormones, new stressors. Maybe you didn't sleep well last night. In the pre-bolus itself, we look at food as fuel. There's different types of foods that require different pre-boluses. There's different activities before and after meals that are going to impact your pre-bolus. All these things have to be taken into consideration. I mean, really mastering your diabetes is not for the faint of heart. I'll tell you, for years, I did not care enough to put the work in. And it showed. I ended up in the hospital. I've got into some pretty dangerous situations, right? But I just wasn't ready or willing to put the work in. And that's kind of what you deal with. Some more volatile blood sugars, less ideal A1Cs, probably horrible time in range. I wouldn't know. I didn't check, right? But if you're willing to put the work in, understanding what the work looks like is going to help you a lot to determine what your next steps are, to build that blueprint out, right? So I'm going to take a second to kind of read through some comments. We've got a bunch of people on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. What's going on, folks? So on YouTube and Facebook, looks like we got someone asking, do you use regular insulin? I use Humalog currently. When I was MDI, I was Lantus and Humalog, and those have been pretty much all I've ever used. Haven't really had much of a need for it in the past. Let's jump on Instagram. Let's see what we got. Instagram, I see you guys. Oh, you guys are so nice. Hi all night. Yep. For the pizza hours. Hi later. Let's see what we got. Good to see you, Callie. How's that baby? Baby's good. Thanks for asking. You said always full of knowledge. You're a rock star. Appreciate you. How do you do that with a long run past 5 miles? Great question. I have yet to break 5 miles. I'm not looking forward to it. Here's another thing about me. I've been telling my private clients that have type 1, we have this thing called the Warriors Inner Circle. We work on things that are more advanced. And I've been telling them a big phrase that I've been living by recently is do hard things. Like that's it. Just do hard things. And I have seen so many benefits from doing hard things, whether it's physical or mental, and just pushing through barriers, obstacles, challenges. Like today, did not want to go swimming. I did not want to add that into my routine. Just didn't want to deal with it. I've put it off for 2 months. And so finally, I did it and I feel amazing. And it worked out great. Uh, Turns out 80/20 blood sugar formula to the rescue. Again, 100% time and range. Every single workout that I've done, 100% time and range. And there's a reason for that. It's intentional. I use food as fuel. I make my choices. And really, all actions are very well thought out. Everything is set up, so I don't have to worry about what if. It's not a matter of am I going to go low. It's how much fuel do I need? What's my basal recalculation? This is kind of how I operate with diabetes. I'm very analytical. I believe that is the only way to master your diabetes and achieve full predictability is to actually do the work, do hard things, right? So how do you do that with a long run past 5 miles? Great question. The strategy would be adapted slightly, but for the most part, I would say if I can match my burn rate, it should be a relatively stable line consistently. But I'm going to have to try that. That's going to be this next week. I actually got injured this week, messed up my knee. So I had to put a halt on the running, and that's why I was swimming today. So good question, though. Eat to live. Yeah, exactly. Food as fuel. That's the phrase I was looking for. Thank you, V Warrior 8. Do you eat to live or do you live to eat? That should have been the title for today. I love that. Oh, man. Love that. Food for fuel, not for pleasure only. Absolutely. All right. Looks like I got the questions there. So one thing I wanted to add in here, food as fuel. There are a lot of decisions we have to make as diabetics. Not all of them are easy. Some of them require self-discipline, right? If you're treating a low, do you go for the delicious looking enchilada, or do you just be a grown-up and have a sip of juice? Which sounds like a paradox. Be a grown-up and drink your juice box. I love it. Everyone asks me, is the juice box for your daughter? And I'm like, no, the juice box is for me. But that's really the choice that it comes down to. We know what the right choices are half the time. We know what's better for our blood sugars, but sometimes we just decide it's not worth it. I don't want a pre-bolus today. And to me, that's a decision that you will see the results from. You get to decide how your blood sugars respond. And if you don't know how they're going to respond, like if I'm talking about food as fuel, like the macronutrients, proteins, fats, carbs, and how they're all going to respond differently, how do you eat the right snack at the perfect amount and the perfect time to have perfect blood sugars through a run or a workout or a bike ride or playing with your kids? Full disclosure, I use these exact same strategies for playing with my daughter. Like she's very active. For my clients who play with their grandkids, for other clients who are just very active at work, food as fuel. If you make the right decisions, you can keep blood sugar stable so much easier. I get to go on these runs and just listen to educational podcasts. I don't have to. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a caveat. This is not medical advice. Don't do what I'm doing, but I don't have to check my blood sugars as I'm running. I know what they're going to do. That level of certainty can only come through formulas. It's the only thing that's going to get you there. And my clients will tell you this too. It's just a really amazing shift that you get to have in mental peace when you have that certainty. Anyways, I'm getting off target. So what I wanted to share with you guys is this next month, we actually have this thing called the Renegade Warriors newsletter. Has anybody heard about that? Do we have anybody who's part of it? Drop the word Renegade if you're already part of that community. We got a couple hundred of you in there. But that community, we sent a poll out. I'm like, hey, you guys want me to talk about exercise or food? And it was a pretty even split, but more people. Now we got Tricia says Renegade, love it. More people requested food. And so we ended up doing a poll. Now we got Suzanne on the Instagram. I sound so old. Oh, look at the Facebook. Ronnie on Renegade, or we got Facebook and YouTube, both of y'all saying Renegade. Love it. We asked them, they said food. And I said, you know what? It'd be really cool if I did a bit of a deep dive into food as fuel. How do I optimize my nutrition? And what do I recommend for my clients as far as the diabetic diet goes? How do I make decisions that benefit my blood sugars? But also, how can I make the right decisions to predict stable blood sugars. Like that's the big goal. So if that's something that would be helpful for you, if you're like, I would love to learn about nutrition, I want to learn about food as fuel, right? That's one of the big topics that we're going to be covering this next month in the April newsletter. So if that's something that you're not part of yet, we're actually, I shouldn't tell you guys this, but I'm going to tell you because you're here with me. We're doing a full deep dive in a masterclass as well that they all going to get access to. So congrats, everybody. You didn't know this, but we're doing a masterclass for you. It's included. Anybody who is not part of that yet, though, and has been curious about food as fuel, what do I eat to make sure blood sugars are stabilized? That's going to be something that you will not want to miss out on. And there, it's a printed, like a magazine, basically, that we write out, we put together and ship out. Once they're shipped, we do not reprint them. So this is like the one chance that you'll have to go and grab it. And I'll just tell you guys too what it looks like. I see you guys already getting excited about that masterclass, huh? Once we ship them out, this is something that, you know, people, you can keep forever. Actually, check this out. I got 2 of them right here. I get these copies delivered because it's fun to get them. And I like reading through them again. So packed full of tons of info. Obviously, we got like a ridiculous amount. I flipped through that way too fast. There you go. All kinds of info and videos and whatever. Basically, it's going to change your life. So if that's something that would be helpful, you can go to renegadenewsletter.com. It's something that is really a passion project that we've been doing. And I think April actually marks 1 year, which I'm super excited about, which is why we're pumping it full of some additional content that you guys, I can't wait to share it with you. But in celebrating that 1 year anniversary, we're going to really just pack it full of actionable content. And that's what it is. It's actionable content delivered to your doorstep monthly so that you can have something to improve upon, right? With your blood sugars, with your quality of life as you're looking into how to master your diabetes. So if you're on YouTube and Facebook, I think I can do this. I can. Sweet. I'm going to type it in. There you go. If you're not on YouTube or Facebook and you're on Instagram, then you're going to have to type it in yourself because I can't do that on my phone right now. But it's Renegade Newsletter. The word renegade is in there because we think differently. Obviously, doctors aren't telling you how to measure and track fats and proteins and what dosing strategies you might consider. Obviously, I'm not giving you medical advice, but you know, things that work for myself and my clients and hundreds, in some cases, thousands of people, pretty good track record of what works and what doesn't. So grab that. It's shipping out in the next couple of days. And it's just going to be a deep dive into food as fuel and what we should be looking at. I'll tell you one thing too. A lot of people think that protein is the great stabilizer of blood sugars. And that's why Matt had a protein bar. That is false. Protein does not stabilize blood sugars. Protein impacts blood sugars. In the absence of insulin, protein will rise blood sugars. So when you think about protein and why it's been effective for stabilizing blood sugars, you might consider asking yourself, why do I need so much protein to stop a blood sugar drop? Maybe something else is off. Might need to get to the source of that one. So protein will not fix everything, but it is a tool that can be used. That's why we want to look at food as fuel and not just as pleasure. So I hope this one was helpful for you guys. I got to hop off and jump into another call. But remember that food we can utilize to help predict more stable blood sugars depending on the situation. Yes, food can be fun. I want it to be fun for you. It shouldn't just be viewed as fuel, but understand that everything, and I mean everything that we put into our mouths does impact our blood sugars and our bodies. Take care of it. Take care of yourselves. All right. Appreciate you guys. Remember to go check out Renegade Newsletter. Add your address in there before the end of the month so we can get you those newsletters to your doorstep. And I'll catch you guys next time. Have an awesome week. I'll see you next week, every week, Thursdays, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern live. And we'll catch you next time. Until then, keep up.